which is the core problem we are unpacking today. We are doing a deep dive into a brilliant operational playbook that solves this exact crisis.
And it is a fascinating playbook.
It really is. We are pulling apart an inside baseball field manual titled Crafting Category Leadership in Enterprise AI, how enterprise AI brands are actually built.
Such a great title.
It sets the stakes immediately. This was put together by Gaurav Gupta, who is the global head of brand at EdgeVerve AI Next, which is a division of Infosys.
Right, but this isn't just his solo manifesto, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Gaurav essentially hosted a textual roundtable. He brought in masterclass insights from his core task force. That's Karthik Ramakrishnan, Remo M., and Inturi Varshitha.
The actual team on the ground.
Exactly. They're the actual architects who built this thing from the ground up.
And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the interlocking pillars of that exact architectural blueprint.
Yes.
Because we're not going to be sitting here discussing vague, high-level marketing theory today.
Definitely not. We want the mechanics.
Right. We are going to break down the exact mechanical systems, the daily rituals, and, the strict governance models this specific team used. They call it Relentless Narrative Orchestration.
I love that phrase, Relentless Narrative Orchestration.
It's powerful. And the goal is to equip you with the exact strategies they use to take a highly capable software engine and transform it into a definitive transformational industry leader.
So you can apply it to your own work.
Exactly. We want you to be able to take these tools and apply them to whatever legacy you're trying to build.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Gaurav starts right out of the gate with a massive paradigm shift. He calls it the architect's mandate.
Right, the foundation of everything.
Yeah, his foundational premise is that in the enterprise AI sector, competing for market share actually means fighting for mind share. The old playbook is just dead.
Completely dead.
Like logo visibility, sponsoring a golf tournament so your name is on a banner, or traditional lead gen tactics where you trick someone into downloading a white paper just to harvest their email.
The classic trap.
Right. Those are completely insufficient now.
They are worse than insufficient, honestly. They are a distraction. And that is a very hard reality for a lot of traditional business leaders to accept.
Oh, I bet. It goes against everything they've been taught.
Exactly. Many executives have spent 30 years measuring marketing success by those exact metrics. How many impressions did we get? How many leads are in the CRM?
The vending machine approach.
Yes. But Gaurav's mandate argues that brand vision in this specific category AI platforms, it cannot just sit in a siloed communications department.
It's bigger than that.
Much bigger. It isn't just about writing catchy copy. It sits at this incredibly complex, high-stakes intersection of industry reputation, employer magnetism, internal culture building, and executive presence.
Right.
If you only focus on lead generation, you're treating your brand like a vending machine. Put a quarter in, get an email out. Gaurav is arguing that you have to treat your brand like a gravitational pull.
Right. And to build that gravitational pull, he poses these massive, almost existential questions that his task force had to answer before they ever designed a single web page.
They had to look inward first.
They did. It wasn't the standard product marketing questionnaire of, what features do we sell? It was, who really are we? What do we actually stand for in a chaotic world?
Those are tough questions for a tech company.
They really are.
Yeah.
And also, why would elite, highly paid talent actually want to leave their comfortable jobs and join us? How should our C-suite show up in public to project stability?
It's about identity, not just product.
Exactly. And working through that gauntlet of questions led to the evolution of their core thesis. They originally started with a concept called the champion's arc.
Which is okay, but a bit generic.
Yeah, a bit standard. But they eventually evolved it. They scrapped the old to land on this unifying positioning statement. Craft your next with AI.
That's so much more active.
It is. And that specific phrase is designed to thread together the entire life cycle of enterprise AI. It connects the early experimental phase, moving from pilots to production.
Right, the hardest jump for any enterprise.
Exactly. It brings in the strict enterprise guardrails, and crucially, it emphasizes human-in-the-loop intelligence.
We really need to look at the mechanics of why that specific phrasing, craft your next with AI, is so pivotal here.
Let's do it. Why does that specific wording matter so much?
Because if you go out into the market and position yourself as just another AI tool, you are instantly entering a feature war.
And nobody wins a feature war.
Exactly. You are fighting over who processes data 10% faster or who is 5% cheaper per token. It is a race to the bottom.
A total commodity gaming.
Right. But Gaurav's team made a deliberate choice to elevate above the future war. They positioned EdgeVerve AI next as a future-facing hub where rigorous AI governance meets irreplaceable human judgment.
Oh, that's a big shift.
It's massive. They aren't just participating in an existing category, they are creating a new one. And when you create a category, you aren't just selling a piece of software anymore.
You're selling a paradigm.
You are defining a completely new reality for the buyer. You are essentially sitting across the table from a chief information officer and telling them, the paradigm you used to work in is over. Here is the new reality, and we are the architects of it.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to see if I'm tracking the difference.
Go for it.
It sounds like the difference between being a highly skilled camera operator versus being a visionary film director.
Oh, I like that.
Like if you are positioning yourself as a tool, you are the camera operator. You are just saying, look at the high definition resolution I can capture. Look at my processing speed.
Right, focusing on the specs.
Yeah, you are just shooting whatever is standing right in front of you.
Yeah.
But the director orchestrates the entire cinematic universe.
They control the vision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They choose the lighting, the mood, the narrative pacing. The camera operator tells you what is happening. The director tells you why it matters and makes you feel it.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize the shift. The camera operator is a commodity. You can always hire a cheaper camera operator.
Exactly.
But the director builds the world you want to live in. And in enterprise AI right now, buyers are terrified. They don't want a cheaper camera. They want a world they can trust.
They need guidance.
They really do. They want a director who knows where the story is going because they are risking their entire corporate infrastructure on this technology.
Okay, I love the theory of the film director, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Please do.
Having a beautifully crafted cinematic thesis like Craft Your Next sounds absolutely amazing in a boardroom. You present that on a slide, everyone claps, the CEO is happy.
Sure, happens all the time.
But in the real world, in massive global organizations, those words are just dry erase marker on a whiteboard if the actual company is full of stubborn silos.
The dreaded silos.
Right. In most enterprises, the engineering team doesn't talk to the sales team. The sales team fundamentally distrusts the marketing team, and the product team is just off doing their own thing.
It's like a corporate immune system.
Yes, an immune system that actively rejects new ideas. So how did Gaurav's task force actually bridge those massive belief gaps internally to make this cinematic universe a reality? Because you can't just mandate that people change their behavior.
No, you certainly cannot, and attempting to do so usually causes a full-blown mutiny.
Right. People hate being told what to believe.
Exactly. That friction you were talking about, that corporate immune system, is the graveyard of brilliant brand strategies. The EdgeVerve task force didn't inherit some utopian harmony.
They had to fight for it.
They had to overcome very real, very entrenched cross-functional friction. And the way they survived that immune system response was by systematically dismantling the traditional spray-and-pray marketing approach.
Okay, how so?
They recognized a fundamental truth. You cannot align a deeply fragmented internal company with a fragmented, chaotic external message.
Oh, that's interesting. So the external fixes the internal.
Exactly. If your marketing is just throwing random spaghetti at the wall, your internal teams have nothing solid to rally around. So they had to build distinct stature. They had to stand out in what Gaurav perfectly describes as a sea of sameness.
Which means we need to get into how they actually built that stature out in the wild. Because the first major hurdle they faced is that the enterprise AI landscape is incredibly fragmented by nature.
It's completely disjointed for the buyer.
It really is. If you are a buyer, your experience is a mess. You might see a random webinar on LinkedIn on a Tuesday. 3 weeks later, you might read an analyst briefing from Gartner.
Right.
2 months after that, a sales rep might email you a PDF proposal. There is zero continuity.
It's just noise.
So Gaurav's solution to this disjointed nightmare was to create a story spine. I absolutely love that term.
Very visual.
A story spine that maps perfectly to the entire psychological journey of the buyer. They broke this spine down into 4 distinct stages.
And those are belief, understanding, evidence, and activation.
Right.
We should really take the time to explore the mechanics of each of those 4 stages because they represent a profound understanding of buyer psychology.
Let's do it. Break it down for us.
This isn't just a sales funnel, it's a cognitive journey. Let's start with belief. Before I even consider buying your software, I have to believe that the problem you are solving is urgent and existential.
The house is on fire.
Exactly. If I don't believe the house is on fire, I'm not going to buy your fire extinguisher. So the top of the spine is purely about establishing why this transformation matters to my industry.
Okay, so that's belief. What about understanding?
Then we move to understanding. This is the mechanics. Once I believe the house is on fire, I need to know how your extinguisher works.
Right, the practical application.
Yeah, like how does this AI actually integrate into my legacy mainframe systems without breaking everything?
And then comes evidence, which is arguably the most critical stage in enterprise tech.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because if I'm a CIO, I am not going to be your guinea pig. I need the social proof. Where has this exact solution been proven to work at scale without resulting in a catastrophic data breach or, a massive PR nightmare?
Exactly. The risk mitigation factor there is huge. They need to see that someone else survived the jump.
Right. And finally, you reach activation.
Right. Okay, I believe you, I understand it, I've seen the proof. Now, how do I actually start?
Like what's step one tomorrow morning?
Exactly. How do I deploy this tomorrow without disrupting my entire global workforce? By mapping the brand as a distinct guiding force across that entire unbroken spine, they ensured something vital.
What's that?
That no matter where a buyer entered the ecosystem, whether it was an early thought leadership article or a late-stage implementation guide, the narrative held absolutely firm.
And that firm narrative relies heavily on their approach to thought leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There was a specific line in Gaurav's breakdown that I think every marketer needs printed on their wall.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
Content is commodity. Points of view are power.
It's so true.
And if you think about it, especially in the age of generative AI, content is literally infinite. And AI can write a perfectly grammatically correct, highly optimized blog post about supply chain logistics in about 3 seconds.
Anyone can generate a white paper now.
Content is virtually free. But having an actual definitive human point of view, a stance that takes a risk and says, the industry is going this way and here's why, that is incredibly rare.
What's fascinating here is, well, it is rare and it is highly valuable, but the strategic brilliance is how they chose to deploy those points of view.
Right. It wasn't just random blogging.
Not at all. They didn't just blast them out on a corporate blog and hope for the best. They explicitly optimized for desirability over simple awareness.
Wait, pause there. Let's dig into that. What is the practical difference between desirability and awareness in this context? Because a lot of people use those terms completely interchangeably.
It's a crucial distinction. Awareness just means people know you exist. Oh yes, I've heard of EdgeVerve AI next. That's awareness.
Okay, just recognizing the name.
Right. Desirability means they know you exist and they want to be associated with you. They want to buy from you. They want to work for you. They want to partner with you.
So awareness is passive, desirability is active.
Exactly. Awareness is passive. Desirability is an active magnetic pull. To build that pull, the team targeted very specific high-stature avenues.
They weren't just chasing likes on Twitter.
No, they weren't fighting for clicks on social media. They were executing deep dive features in TQ magazine. They were placing their executives on highly curated, influential podcasts.
Real authority building.
Right. They secured bylines in Tier 1 publications. They actively went after prestigious academic partnerships to borrow institutional trust.
Oh, that's smart. Borrowing trust.
And they aggressively pursued major verified industry awards like the Stevie, Globee, and Likewise awards.
So they were playing a totally different game than their competitors. While everyone else was treating marketing as a lead generation machine, they were treating reputation as an actual currency.
Reputation is the ultimate currency in B2B.
It really is. By compounding this online reputation and building these very deliberate social operations, their brand equity actually became a revenue precursor.
Yes.
It started influencing the massive business engine without ever stepping on the sales team's toes.
Which is a brilliant political move internally. In most enterprises, sales teams feel incredibly threatened when marketing tries to do too much bottom-of-the-funnel work.
Let's define that for anyone outside a marketing bubble. What does bottom of the funnel actually look like in a massive enterprise deal?
Bottom of the funnel is that high-anxiety final stage. The pen is literally hovering over a multi-million-dollar contract.
The sweaty palm stage.
Exactly. The buyer is looking at pricing sheets, deep technical specs, and implementation timelines. Sales reps want to control that moment entirely.
And they should, really.
Right. If marketing comes in with flashy brochures at that stage, it feels intrusive and tone-deaf. But by focusing purely on high-level stature and desirability, the brand team was essentially softening the beachhead.
So they did the heavy lifting before sales even enter the room.
Exactly. They weren't trying to close the deal. They were making the deal closable. When the sales team finally made the call, the prospect already respected the brand.
The trust was pre-established.
Right, which radically shortens the sales cycle.
There's a really specific operational example in the source material that illustrates this continuity beautifully. They hosted a flagship conference called Advantage 2025.
A huge undertaking.
Massive. Now, if we are being honest, we all know how corporate events usually go. A company spends millions throwing a massive event in Vegas or somewhere similar.
The CEO gives a keynote.
Everyone claps, they have a few drinks, they go home, and by Monday morning, the entire theme of the event is completely forgotten. It was just a sugar rush.
A very expensive sugar rush.
Right. But Gaurav's team took the Advantage 2025 theme and treated it as a living organism. They extended that exact narrative into their corporate brochures, their ongoing LinkedIn campaigns, their media kits, and their internal training modules.
They kept it alive.
And they ran it year-round. Their underlying philosophy was that continuity outlasts spikes.
And that philosophy is the ultimate antidote to the fragmented sea of sameness we talked about earlier.
Because a spike just fades away.
Exactly. A spike like a single viral post, a flashy press release, or a 3-day event fades from memory almost instantly. But continuity builds a mental monument in the buyer's mind.
It becomes undeniable.
Right. When a buyer sees the exact same cohesive message in January, and then again in April, and then validated by an analyst in September, it creates a sense of inevitability.
But let's be realistic about what that actually takes.
Yeah.
Sustaining a massive, cohesive theme like Advantage across an entire global organization for 365 days.
It's incredibly difficult.
That isn't just about having good intentions or like a nice brand book.
Yeah.
That requires a relentless, mechanical, highly disciplined system.
You need a conductor.
You need an operational brain making sure all the gears are turning at the exact right speed across multiple continents. And that perfectly introduces Karthik Ramakrishnan and his orchestration engine.
Yes, Karthik's role as the content orchestrator is really the engine room of this entire operation.
The guy making the trains run on time.
Exactly. His explicit mandate was to build durable narrative spines that traverse every single touch point with perfect fidelity.
What does perfect fidelity mean in this context?
To put that plainly, if the CEO stands on a stage in London and makes a promise about human-in-the-loop AI, the website needs to immediately reflect that promise.
Right.
The technical white paper needs to mathematically prove it, and the sales deck in Tokyo needs to pitch it perfectly. That level of fidelity doesn't happen by accident.
It takes a system, and Karthik built a very deliberate 5-step pipeline to guarantee that fidelity. And walking through these steps shows just how rigorous this was.
Let's walk through them.
Okay, first you have the thesis, which we know is craft your next. That is the North Star.
Everything flows from there.
Second, you have the high-level themes. These are the supporting pillars, like moving from experimental pilots to actual production, or the necessity of human intelligence governing AI.
Right, the core arguments.
Third, you define the content formats. This is where you figure out the vehicle. Is this specific message best delivered as a high-level executive point of view, or does it need to be a granular enablement primer for the sales team?
Form follows function.
Exactly. Fourth, you map it to the customer journeys. This hooks right back into that belief to activation spine we just discussed. Where is the buyer when they read this?
Are they just learning, or are they ready to buy?
Right. And fifth, perhaps the most difficult, publishing rhythms. These are strict cadences designed specifically to prevent message decay.
To really grasp the power of this kind of orchestration, Karthik points to a fantastic historical analogy from the text, the evolution of ServiceNow.
Oh, that's a great example.
It really is. He looks at ServiceNow's transformation from what was essentially a relatively simple utilitarian IT ticketing tool back around 2010.
Right, just a basic help desk thing.
Yeah, into the absolute AI-driven enterprise titan it is today. And the vital insight there is that ServiceNow did not achieve that dominance through one massive, disruptive, Super Bowl-style rebrand.
They didn't just change the logo overnight.
No, they didn't just flip a switch and suddenly become a titan. They achieved it through relentless narrative orchestration. They seamlessly and patiently wove together their keynotes, their media coverage, their how-to guides, and their go-to-market materials over a period of years.
It is the stark difference between a 3-year resonance mindset and a 3-month vanity spike mindset. They were playing the long, compounding game.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me, and frankly, a bit controversial.
Oh.
Yeah, they discuss a deliberate shift from traditional, dry B2B marketing into what they call B2C sophistication.
Right, blending consumer tactics into enterprise.
Exactly. They argue that because multi-year enterprise commitments require absolute lock-in trust, they started utilizing consumer marketing elements. Things like edge mascots acting as friendly AI agents, deep emotional story arcs, and characters representing real, flawed users.
It is a massive pivot from the standard B2B playbook.
Okay, I have to stop here and push back hard on this.
Let's hear it.
Let's really look at the reality of B2B enterprise sales. We are talking about chief information officers and procurement committees making massive multi-million-dollar decisions. Decisions that could easily get them fired if things go wrong.
High stakes. Very high stakes.
Incredibly high stakes. They are reporting directly to risk-averse boards of directors. They are evaluating these platforms using strict governance frameworks, compliance audits, and complex risk assessment spreadsheets.
Right.
Do they really truly care about a relatable cartoon mascot or an emotional story arc? Doesn't injecting B2C cuteness risk trivializing a highly sophisticated product? I mean, if I'm spending $10 million, I want cold, hard facts, not a story.
It is a totally valid skepticism, and honestly, it's the exact pushback they probably faced internally from their own technical teams.
I can imagine the engineers hating the mascot idea.
Oh, absolutely. But the core realization Karthik and the team had is a fundamental truth of behavioral economics. Under the bespoke suit, under the imposing title of Chief Information Officer, the enterprise buyer is still a biologically wired human being.
Well, sure.
Yes, they have spreadsheets. But they are a human being who is likely incredibly stressed, overworked, and terrified of making a decision that could break their company's infrastructure.
They're scared.
Exactly. Spreadsheets appeal to their need for logic and rigor, absolutely. But stories appeal to their deep-seated need for psychological safety.
So you were saying the rigor and the relatability have to coexist.
They must. If you only provide spreadsheets, you are cold and easily replaceable by a slightly cheaper spreadsheet.
That makes sense.
The stories in the B2C sophistication bridge the intimacy gap. When a CIO sees a story arc about a stressed IT manager successfully implementing the tool without losing their mind,
It shows empathy.
exactly, it subconsciously signals to the buyer, we understand the human friction you are going to face when you try to roll this out to your 10,000 employees, and we are going to safely guide you through it. It's not about being cute. It's about signaling empathy at scale.
Wow. Okay. That is profound. It's deep empathy disguised as marketing collateral. But even if you build the most empathetic, perfectly orchestrated external story in the world, even if Karthik's engine is humming flawlessly, the entire thing will collapse like a house of cards if the internal employees don't actually believe the story.
Internal alignment is everything.
Right. If a buyer loves the empathetic marketing, but then they call customer support and the engineer on the phone sounds miserable and disconnected from the vision, the illusion shatters.
You cannot fake conviction at an enterprise scale.
You really can't. Which brings us to the internal battlefield, Remo M's evangelization mastery.
Yes, this is where we tackle the talent and culture side of the equation. Remo focused on talent magnetism, and they approach this entirely differently than a standard human resources department.
They weren't just throwing pizza parties.
No, they didn't just put up posters in the break room framing EdgeVerve as a fun place to work with free snacks. They fundamentally reframed the narrative. They positioned the company as a career-defining arena for world-class marketers.
And Rena, I love that word choice.
It raises the stakes. They told their internal teams, you are not just execution past masters taking orders from the C-suite. You are visionary partners in building the destiny of this platform.
Remo M operated as the evangelization and PR champion, and her core philosophy hinges on this idea that corporate communications isn't just a megaphone for amplifying a message to the public.
Right, it's a two-way mirror.
Exactly. The real work is taking those massive promises you're making externally to the market and holding a mirror up to the internal employees to forge an unbreakable alignment.
Because the cognitive dissonance will destroy a company from the inside out.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, if your external marketing brilliantly declares, we are the cutting-edge pioneers of AI governance, but your internal reality on a Tuesday morning is a chaotic mess where no one knows who is in charge and the Wi-Fi barely works.
The employees see right through it.
Exactly. Your employees are going to become deeply cynical. Remo had to actively fight what Gaurav calls belief silos. Different departments, engineering, sales, product, all had their own entrenched ways of thinking and their own localized goals that just didn't align with the craft your next thesis.
To break down those silos, Remo didn't just send out a memo. She instituted serious, rhythmic countermeasures.
Real operational changes.
Yeah, she established editorial sync meetings to force collective ownership across departments. She built strict narrative vetting processes to intercept any rogue off-brand messaging before it leaked out.
Catching it before it does damage.
Right. And I found her strategic use of industry awards to be absolute genius. We talked about those prestigious Stevie and Globee awards earlier.
The external validation.
Yeah, a normal company wins one of those, takes a photo with the trophy, puts it on a shelf in the lobby, and forgets about it. But Remo weaponized those awards internally.
How so? Walk through the mechanics of that weaponization, because that's a strong word.
She didn't treat them as vanity metrics. She used them as heavy artillery against internal skepticism.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if a middle manager was pushing back on the new craft your next narrative, saying it was too risky or too different, Remo could drop an international award on the table and say, look, the outside world impartial, highly respected judges are actively validating that what we are building is category defining. The market agrees with the vision.
That shuts down an argument pretty fast.
It really does. They became tangible proof points of execution excellence to silence the internal critics and build immense pride.
That is the absolute essence of influence without authority. Remo wasn't the CEO. She didn't have the power to just, fire people who refused to listen.
She had to persuade them.
She had to meticulously stitch this conviction together in an environment where fragmentation threatened to tear the whole thing apart. She achieved this through those relentless weekly syncs, narrative alignment workshops, and one-on-one leadership coaching.
It's grueling work.
It is, and I think this is a vital moment for you listening right now to reflect on your own daily reality. Think about your own workplace.
Yeah, how does this apply to you?
Exactly. How often does your leadership team mandate a bold, exciting new direction at an all-hands meeting, but the belief just doesn't flow naturally down the org chart?
Happens all the time.
The new vision is announced on Monday, and it dies in middle management by Thursday. Remo's playbook proves that organizational alignment isn't some magical culture you just stumble into. It is a relentless operational rhythm.
It is exactly like trying to get a massive, disjointed, 100-person choir to sing in perfect sweeping harmony.
That's a great image.
Especially when half of the singers can't even see the sheet music,
Yeah.
and the other half want to sing a different song entirely. Remo wasn't just doing traditional PR. She was essentially conducting the choir from the middle of the risers.
Right in the thick of it.
Yeah, she was leaning over and whispering the notes to the altos. She was nudging the tenors when they were off tempo, making sure every single person in the organization was breathing at the exact same time.
And achieving that kind of harmonious internal evangelization is a massive, hard-fought victory. But, as with any complex system, solving one problem immediately reveals the next operational hurdle.
There's always a new bottleneck.
Always. You now have hundreds of employees who deeply believe in the unified story. They are energized. They are empowered.
Which is great.
It is, until they start creating things. How do you physically ensure that every single PowerPoint slide, every promotional video, and every PDF brochure that these hundreds of newly empowered employees produce actually stays visually and tonally on brand?
Ah, right. Brand anarchy.
Exactly. If everyone is racing to create content, how do you prevent brand anarchy without micromanaging them to death?
Right, because the moment you tell a global team, okay, send every single comma and every single color choice to the central brand office for approval, the entire company grinds to an absolute halt. You kill the speed.
You become the bottleneck.
Which brings us to the operational genius of Inturi Varshita and her incredibly clever concept of design as governance.
Varshita's domain tackles culture and internal narrative through the lens of design. And before we get into the visual mechanics, it's worth noting how they shifted the internal culture.
With the town halls, right?
Yes, they started transforming their internal town halls. Instead of the typical dry, hour-long process updates about quarterly quotas, they turned these meetings into narrative moments.
Making it real for the team.
Exactly. They featured actual emotional customer success stories to make the abstract promise of craft your next highly tangible for the engineers building it.
So the engineers see the human impact.
Right. But Inturi Varshita, operating as the design champion, had the daunting task of ensuring all of this output looked cohesive globally. Her underlying philosophy is brilliant. She argues forcefully that design leadership in enterprise tech is not about auteur fantasies.
I want to highlight that phrase, auteur fantasies.
Yeah.
Because so often we think of a lead designer as this solitary genius in a black turtleneck.
Right, locked in a dark room.
Exactly. Painstakingly crafting every single pixel by hand, and no one else is allowed to touch it.
But Varshitha recognized that relying on one genius designer, making everything bespoke, is a bottleneck that will just choke an enterprise.
It doesn't scale.
It doesn't scale at all. Design leadership at this scale is not about personal artistry. It is entirely about establishing governance that ensures consistency at massive scale.
To accomplish this, she pulled a concept straight out of the history of Japanese manufacturing. It's a concept called poka-yoke,
Poka-yoke, right.
which roughly translates to mistake proofing. Originally, this was used on assembly lines, designing a machine part so it physically cannot be inserted backward.
You literally can't mess it up.
Exactly. She took that physical manufacturing principle and applied it to digital corporate design. She created strict narrative spines, unbending decision frameworks, modular versioning, and massive accessible component libraries.
Systems upon systems.
Yeah, we are talking about pre-approved hero blocks, drag-and-drop testimonial cards, and locked visual hierarchies. Everything was highly templatized, yet modular enough to be flexible.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of business operations, Varshitha's approach touches on one of the great paradoxes of corporate governance.
The paradox.
Usually when we hear the word governance, we immediately think of red tape, a bureaucratic obstacle course designed to slow us down.
Right, filling out forms in triplicate.
Exactly. But Varshitha proved that when governance is lightweight but rigorous, speed paradoxically increases.
Because you completely remove the friction of indecision. Let me try another analogy here. I was trying to conceptualize how poka-yoke actually feels to an employee.
Let's hear it.
It's exactly like putting the bumpers up in a bowling alley.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Imagine a novice bowler. If the gutters are open, that bowler is going to be terrified. They're going to throw the ball incredibly slowly, overthinking every step because they are paralyzed by the fear of throwing a gutter ball and looking foolish.
Right, they're frozen by the risk.
But the second you put those inflatable bumpers up in the gutters, the psychology completely shifts. You are not restricting the bowler, you are actually giving them the absolute fearless freedom to hurl that bowling ball as fast and as hard as they possibly can because they know it is physically impossible to fail.
The ball will always hit the pins.
Exactly. The component libraries were the bumpers.
That is precisely how it functions in practice. Let's walk through a Tuesday afternoon scenario. You have an eager, mid-level sales rep in Germany who needs a hyper-specific, localized one-pager in 10 minutes for a major client meeting.
High-pressure situation.
Very. In the old system, they either wait 3 weeks for the central design team, or they go rogue and make a hideous off-brand document in Microsoft Word.
We've all seen those Word documents. They're terrifying.
They are, but with the bumpers up. They jump into the platform, they use generative AI to draft the text based on the narrative spine, they drag and drop the pre-approved visual components, and they output a flawless piece of collateral in 5 minutes.
It empowers them.
Exactly. By democratizing the design process, Varshitha removed the reliance on bottlenecked hero designers. She empowered distributed teams across the entire global company to accelerate their workflows without ever eroding the core premium brand voice.
And to make sure the bumpers stayed inflated, they backed this up with an editorial triad.
A system of checks and balances.
Right. This was a formal coalition between the design, comms, and content teams. This triad had joint veto power to stop any narrative drift in its tracks. If something somehow slipped past the templates, the triad caught it.
Human oversight.
Exactly. And you can see the sheer power of this poka-yoke approach and how they executed the Physical Advantage flagship event we talked about earlier. The field manual describes how they orchestrated the entire sensory experience at massive scale.
Everything was unified.
The video loops playing in the hallways, the exact hierarchy of the collateral sitting on the dining tables, the massive digital signage wrapping the arena. Every single visual asset flawlessly mirrored the Craft Your Next narrative. It wasn't just an event, it was a flawless physical manifestation of a digital brand.
It is an incredible logistical and creative achievement, but as robust as this system is, even a flawless self-governing machine needs a pilot to steer it through the most treacherous waters of any enterprise.
Yeah.
The C-suite and the board of directors. A narrative can survive the marketing department, but it has to survive contact with the executives who hold the ultimate purse strings.
Right, the final bosses.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final elevation of Gaurav's playbook, executive advisory and AI governance.
Let's look closely at executive advisory. The core insight the team had here is that C-suite decision makers do not need more content.
They have too much already.
They are quite literally drowning in dashboards, reports, and content. What a CEO desperately needs is clarity.
Pure, actionable clarity.
Gaurav and his brand task force refused to just sit in the marketing department taking orders. They elevated themselves to act as top-tier strategic advisors.
They earned their seat at the table.
They did. They were literally sitting in the room with the CEO right before major board presentations to reshape the overarching narrative arc. They were aggressively coaching the head of product on how to emotionally frame their keynote speeches. They were advising global sales leadership on how to structure specific, high-stakes account narratives.
The document uses a very specific, potent phrase for this dynamic: influence through clarity, contrasting it directly with mere execution.
Influence through clarity.
Yes. We need to ask, why is clarity considered a superpower at the C-suite level?
Because it cuts through the noise.
Because executives are dealing with massive, paralyzing complexity. They have conflicting data points arriving every minute from legal, finance, product, and HR.
It's overwhelming.
It is. The person in the room who can synthesize that chaos into a single, undeniable truth, a clear, compelling narrative, holds immense institutional power. By providing that clarity, the brand team wasn't just executing marketing collateral, they were actively shaping the strategic direction and the risk appetite of the entire enterprise.
Which flows perfectly into their stance on content and AI governance. And this is where they finally address the massive elephant in the room: artificial intelligence itself.
You can't talk about AI brands without talking about how they use AI.
Exactly. Obviously, building an AI brand, the team absolutely used AI to accelerate their own workflows. They deployed it for synthesizing deep market research, analyzing topic trends across the global industry, and structuring the rough architecture of first drafts.
It's an incredible accelerant, but, and this is arguably the most critical philosophical stance of the entire field manual, they firmly believe that human judgment is eternal.
Human judgment is eternal.
Yes. While AI is a miracle for accelerating synthesis and drafting, it is human governance and human judgment that actually preserve the soul and the risk tolerance of the brand.
Humans make the final call.
Humans must be the ones to look at the AI's technically perfect output and decide, yes, it's accurate, but is it actually true to our vision? Is this brave? Is this authentically on brand? And does this actually resonate with the specific human anxieties of our audience?
AI can't feel anxiety.
Exactly. AI doesn't feel anxiety, so it can't natively soup it.
I read that section, and it genuinely made me stop and reevaluate the entire landscape. Because if you play this out logically,
Let's play it out.
in a world where literally every single enterprise company, from the trillion-dollar behemoths to the scrappy startups, has access to the exact same foundational AI models.
They all use the same tools.
Right, the exact same tools for high-speed synthesis and drafting. Does human judgment become the only remaining moat? Is a human's ability to be brave and tasteful the only thing that separates a premium, trusted enterprise brand from just becoming generic, algorithmic background noise?
It is a profoundly compelling argument. If your closest competitor can suddenly generate 1,000 technically proficient, grammatically perfect white papers a day using AI, the sheer volume of content is no longer a competitive advantage.
Volume is dead.
Volume is absolutely dead. The only note left is resonance. The only differentiator is the human ability to curate, to be deeply empathetic, to connect disparate cultural dots, and to be brave in a way that a predictive text algorithm simply is not programmed to be.
Algorithms just play it safe.
Algorithms optimize for the average. Brands must optimize for the exceptional. That delicate high-wire balance, aggressively using AI to accelerate the mundane mechanics while fiercely relying on the human soul to govern the ultimate meaning, is what ultimately led to the staggering real-world impact of the EdgeVerve AI Next brand.
And we absolutely have to talk about that impact, because strategy without results is just poetry.
Yeah.
Gaurav calls his final section the reckoning, and the results they achieved are undeniable.
They really proved the thesis.
They took EdgeVerve AI Next from being what was essentially an Infosys internal secret, a great piece of tech that no one was talking about, and turned it into a dominant, category-defining industry conversation.
The measurable impacts they lift validate the immense effort required by this six-pillar methodology.
Give us the highlights.
Analyst mentions, which are the gold standard for enterprise credibility, significantly increased. Unsolicited media queries from Tier 1 publications compounded over time. And incredibly, in a highly volatile tech sector where one hallucination can tank a stock price, they experienced zero reputational incidents.
Zero. That's amazing.
The governance held perfectly.
Plus, that talent magnetism strategy Remo spearheaded actually worked in the real world. Top tier, highly sought-after marketing talent started actively seeking them out, wanting to be part of the arena they were building.
People want to work for winners.
They do. And perhaps most importantly for the survival of the business, this entire brand architecture directly measurably influenced revenue. But it did so through the accumulation of earned trust, not through aggressive, desperate sales pressure.
To synthesize this entire journey, Gaurav provides a task force blueprint for leaders. It perfectly distills everything we've unpacked today into actionable mandates.
Let's run through those for the listener.
1. Vision architect systems. Leaders shouldn't just execute tasks, they must create the permission structures and the physical systems for their teams to thrive.
2. Rituals conquer flux. When market chaos inevitably hits, your rigid weekly sync-ups and your narrative councils are what keep the team from panicking.
3. Continuity compounds. You must fiercely value 3-year narrative resonance over the cheap dopamine of 3-month vanity metrics.
Moving to 4. B2C edge and B2B trust. Never forget the humanity of your buyer. You have to humanize those high-stakes, multi-million-dollar commitments with relatable story arcs.
5. Governance scales soul. Use lightweight structures like Varshita's Poka-Yoke component libraries and bowling alley bumpers to accelerate your team's output without ever losing your unique brand voice.
And 6. Measure reputation's half-life. Do not just track website clicks. Track the compounding long-term effects over time, things like media momentum, the influx of elite talent, and the internal pride of your own employees.
Gaurav boils all of this immense complexity down into one final, elegant equation. Vision clarity plus team empowerment plus ritual persistence plus measurement rigor equals legacy.
That is a powerful equation.
It is. And this raises an important question for you listening right now. Regardless of what your actual job title is, whether you are a CMO, a mid-level manager, or an individual contributor, how can you immediately start implementing these rituals that conquer flux in your very next project?
Where do you start?
How can you start mistake-proofing your team's workflow tomorrow morning? You don't need to be the global head of brand to put the bumpers up in your own lane.
So what does this all mean when we zoom all the way out? When we look back at that deafening, chaotic stadium we started in, the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive is clear.
Very clear.
The enterprise AI wars, or any B2B wars for that matter, are not going to be won by the companies with the loudest megaphones or the most expensive ad campaigns.
Definitely not.
They are going to be won by the companies that orchestrate their internal culture, their design governance, and their thought leadership so tightly and so relentlessly that their story transitions from being a marketing pitch into becoming an inevitable truth in the market.
It is a monumental journey from overcoming bitter internal silos and fragmented spray-and-pray messaging all the way up to establishing a unified, executive-level clarity that resonates on a global scale.
It's an orchestration masterclass.
It really is. While most of their competitors were just banging wildly on drums, Gaurav's task force patiently wrote and conducted a symphony.
It really is a masterclass in modern brand architecture. But before we sign off, I know you had a thought about where this all goes next.
I do.
Gaurav's playbook proves unequivocally that rigorous, centralized human orchestration builds incredible brand stature today. But where does this leave us tomorrow?
Right. I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've established that this delicate balance of AI acceleration and human governance is the current gold standard. But let's look 5 or maybe 10 years into the future.
When the tech is even more advanced.
Exactly. As these AI systems become exponentially more advanced, as they gain the ability to automatically personalize, design, and generate entirely unique hyper-targeted story spines for every individual buyer in real time based on their exact psychological profile.
Oh, wow. Bespoke marketing for every single person.
Right. Well, the very concept of a singularly unified brand narrative become obsolete. Will we even need a central story if the AI can tell 10,000 perfect bespoke stories simultaneously?
That's a wild thought.
Or, conversely, as the world drowns in an ocean of infinite AI-generated personalization, Will the exact human-in-the-loop governance, the bravery, and the unifying soul that this task force pioneered become the single most valuable, scarce commodity on Earth?
That is the ultimate tension between infinite scale and human soul. And how companies choose to navigate that exact tension is what will define the next decade of business. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your curiosity sharp, trust your human judgment, and go start crafting your next big idea.